Vasadvalantim Vajanim Karma Phaleshu Jushtaam Durgam Devigum Sharanamaham Prabhadye Sutarasi Tarase Naha. Salutation to that goddess who is the color of fire, aflame with ardency, bright as the sun, and pleased with the fruits of action offered to her. We take refuge in the goddess Durga, who easily takes us across the ocean of samsara. Om Shanti, 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So as you know, we're in the midst of Navaratri, the 9 sacred nights dedicated to the Divine Mother. Of course, in different parts of India, Navaratri is celebrated differently. In many of the Hindi-speaking areas, it's celebrated with Ram Leela. I used to see the Ram Leela in the Himalayas and in the small villages. It was so delightful to see the villagers acting out the story of Rama. But in Bengal and many other parts of India, the period is dedicated to the Divine Mother in different aspects. In some parts of South India, to Saraswati. In Bengal, of course, to Ma Durga. And there's a connection, as many of you know, maybe all of you know, there's a connection between Durga and Rama. And that comes in the Bengali Ramayana. That it said that when Rama wanted to defeat Ravana, or no, after he had defeated Ravana, he worshipped Ma Durga in order to, in order to defeat Rama. Yes, I'd forgotten the sequence there. It was in order to defeat Ravana that he worshipped Ma Durga to get the strength to defeat Ravana. And so the traditions of Durga Puja and Ram Leela are tied together through that. So before coming to the worship of Durga, I want to look a little bit historically at the worship of the Divine Mother. First of all, it's said by many historians, there's a debate about everything in ancient history, of course, but many historians say that there's evidence of the worship of God as Mother all over the world, in prehistory as well as in early history. And that part is not debatable. The worship of the Mother Goddess can be seen everywhere in cultures around the world. Even in the Middle East, where later came Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, which were devoted to the idea of the fatherhood of God. But even there was the worship of the motherhood of God at the time prior to the rising of those religions. And so it was prevalent around the world, including even the Middle East. You see with the rise of Judaism, there was the opposition to the idea of the Mother Goddess, and there was a reason for that. And I'm not criticizing Judaism for that. They had a reason for doing that. I'll show the other side as well. But the reason for opposing the idea of the Mother Goddess on the part of Judaism, which was basically inherited by Christianity and Islam, was that if you have the idea of God as Mother, then the child comes from the mother herself, is part of the mother, comes from the very body of the mother. And so there's an intimate relationship between the mother and the child. Whereas in Judaism, the idea was that there's a separation between creator and creature. That we are creatures, and all of this is created, and the creator is transcendent. And so the creator is infinitely transcendent, that is infinitely superior to the creation. There can't be a real connection except for one of love between the creator and the creation. And so there was the opposition to the very idea of the Mother Goddess. for that reason, because the mother goddess was seen as intimately connected to the creation which comes out of her very being. So that connection remains between mater and mater. The Latin word for mother is mater, and then mater also comes from Latin, and the two are cognates in the Latin, mother and mater, because matter has come out of the mother. Creation has come out of the mother. And so again, in Judaism, the idea was to protect the transcendental nature of God, the absolute otherness of God. That God is not creation. The creation cannot compromise the transcendental nature of God. And so then there was the opposition to the very idea of the motherhood of God. Of course, in Christianity, that idea of motherhood of God came back in a limited way, limited philosophically, not limited religiously and practically, but limited philosophically or theologically, in the form of Mary. Mary as the mother of God. I say in a limited way theologically because in the Roman Catholic and the Eastern Orthodox churches, which accept the special status of Mary, they defined her not as God, but as a creature who was specially chosen by God for her absolute purity to give birth to the Son of God, Jesus. Practically, Mary was worshipped as God by the common people. The common people didn't make theological distinctions, but the church had to make theological distinctions to be true to that idea of the absolute otherness of God, the absolute transcendence of God. And in Islam also, there's the idea that God, which is true in Judaism and Christianity as well, there's the idea in Islamic theology, that God is beyond gender, that God is not masculine, but that we address him as masculine in human terms, but God is beyond gender. And many of the qualities and names of God in Islam, the 99 names of Allah, some of them are regarded as feminine names, feminine qualities. And in Christianity, you have great saints like Julian of Norwich, a woman. Usually the feminine form of the name is Juliana, but she was Julian of Norwich and a woman, a very great saint in 14th century England, early 14th century. She used to say that she looked on Jesus, looked on Christ as her mother. Said because Jesus was so tender that he was more mother than father. And so you see this idea of the motherhood of God coming back in different forms in a restricted way within Judaism, within Christianity, within Islam, because of reasons that I will go on to explain shortly. The reasons why psychologically and philosophically the motherhood of God is an extremely appealing idea. So one reason why in Judaism there was this opposition to the motherhood of God was what I explained, that again, to keep God transcendent, so that God, the absolute nature of God would not be compromised. Another reason was that the ancient Jews, at the time of the development of Judaism, they were a pastoral and a nomadic people. And you find around the world that there's more emphasis on the mother goddess among agricultural people and less amongst pastoral and nomadic people because of the nature of their life. They're nomadic people. The strong father figure was essential to the preservation of the people because nomads and pastoral people had to be ready for fighting for land rights and so forth. Agricultural people lived a settled life with established boundaries and borders and so forth. So those were two reasons why the fatherhood of God was emphasized in Judaism and as a result in Christianity and in Islam, with modification, with a place given to the feminine qualities as well. As I was saying, you've found at one time around the world this idea of the mother goddesses. You found it in ancient Rome and ancient Greece, among the Germanic peoples, the Norse peoples, the native, indigenous peoples around the world, the idea of mother goddesses. And in some places the mother goddess was stronger, some places the mother goddess was weaker than the father god, but you find the prevalence of the idea of God as mother. And you still find a living tradition of the worship of God as mother in certain places. Of course, as I mentioned, the idea of Mary in Christianity. Though theologically it was explained as Mary being a creature like us, except for that she was born absolutely pure, without the stain of original sin. Many people have heard the idea of the Immaculate Conception, the Immaculate Conception in Christianity. Many people, including Christians, many people think that the Immaculate Conception refers to Jesus, that he was immaculately conceived. No, Jesus was conceived by the Holy Spirit. There was no question of Immaculate Conception. It was Mary who was immaculately conceived in Christian theology, in Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox theology, because of the idea of original sin passing down from generation to generation. So all of us, according to that doctrine, are infected with original sin. There's nothing we can do about it. We're sinners by nature. But Mary, in order to be the mother of the Son of God, it was believed, again, not in Protestant Christianity, but in Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox, that Mary had to be born without sin. How could a sinful being give birth to the Son of God, who is God himself? And so it was believed that the doctrine came about that Mary was conceived without the inheritance of original sin. And so therefore she was a fit vessel to be the mother of God. As we'll see, of course, in Hinduism, there's not that problem. Let me address that right here so that we don't lose the connection and so I don't forget to come back to it. In Hinduism also, there's the idea of the absolute nature of God, that God is utterly transcendent. That is, that Brahman is utterly transcendent. Brahman as the absolute is completely transcendent. There is no world to Brahman. That's why we don't pray to Brahman, because Brahman is completely, the world doesn't even exist for Brahman. Brahman is reality itself, the ocean of transcendent reality, beyond time, beyond space, beyond causation, beyond relationship. But in Hinduism, they had a different way of seeing the relationship of Brahman to the world. Again, in Judaism, it was believed that there were two things, that the creature and creation are absolutely separate from God in order to protect the absolute nature of God, and the idea of creation out of nothing. If there were a primordial matter, a primordial prakriti, as we would say in Hinduism, out of which God made the universe, then there's God plus matter, prakriti. There can't be that, because then God has a second. So God, in order to be the non-dual reality, in Christianity and Judaism, Islam, they don't usually use the term non-duality, though in Sufism they do, but generally in Christianity and Judaism they don't. But there's the idea that God is, there is no second to God. And so then where does creation come from? Well, God creates it out of nothing. So that leaves us with the conclusion, which Christianity was not willing to come to, nor Judaism, that all of this is nothing. All of it, if it's made out of nothing, it is nothing. If it's made out of nothing, it is nothing. Vedanta had a different way, or Hinduism had a different way of approaching the problem of preserving the absolute nature of Brahman. And that is, for the non-dualists, for the Advaita school of Vedanta, the idea of avidya, ignorance, that this universe has come out of ignorance, that Brahman is the transcendental, unique, non-dual reality, unaffected by any illusion. But we have somehow suffered from the ignorance which makes us think that all of this is real and Brahman has disappeared, and we are real as individuals. But eventually we'll attain to knowledge where we see that no, I am that. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. And so in non-dualistic Vedanta philosophy, they came with that idea, not that the universe came out of nothing. No, the universe has come out of the divine being itself. But it came into being through our ignorance. If we had spiritual knowledge, we would see everything as nothing but Brahman. So again, both traditions saw the problem of having God plus something else, but they came to a solution to that in two different ways. So let me come back to what I was going to say before I went off on that tangent, and that is living traditions of God as Mother. Of course, we have the living tradition of Mary, where again, those Christian traditions who worship Mary, theologically they may explain her worship as not worship, but as adoration. They have different terms in order to explain the adoration of Mary as not the same as worship of God. But again, in practical terms, many people in Roman Catholic and Orthodox countries and many saints have said that Mary's grace is the easiest to attain, and so go to Mary for everything. And so that Mary is approached as if she were God herself. And if Christianity had developed in India, certainly Mary would have been recognized as God. There wouldn't have been that philosophical or theological problem. Then in China, Japan, Korea, and among the Chinese diaspora, the Chinese communities around the world, you find the beautiful idea of Kuan Yin. In Japanese, it's Kwanon Sama, and in Chinese Mandarin, it's Kuan Yin. You know Canon, the camera, Canon and the printers and all of that? You know that's from Japan. You know where Canon comes from? Kannon-sama. It's named after Kannon, that is Kuan Yin, the goddess Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin. So Kuan Yin is, when Buddhism came into China, there was the idea of the Bodhisattva, that is a being who has practically attained to Buddhahood, but who has renounced Buddhahood in order to remain back, in order to help carry all beings across to liberation, to nirvana. And so that's a Bodhisattva, one who renounces their own liberation and, out of love for all beings, to carry the whole world towards the nirvana. That I vow, the Bodhisattva says, I vow to delay my own liberation, my own Buddhahood, until I have helped every last sentient being in the universe to cross into Buddhahood. An ideal which Swamiji praised very highly. He said that there were philosophical problems with it, but as a motivation, he praised it very highly. And so there was one of the mythological bodhisattvas of Buddhism, and mythological as far as we know, Avalokiteshvara. Avalokiteshvara. The Dalai Lama of Tibet is considered to be an incarnation of Avalokiteshvara. He is considered to be, by the Tibetans, considered to be a human manifestation of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. But when Buddhism went to China, and with Mahayana Buddhism, Avalokiteshvara also went to China, and then Avalokiteshvara underwent a gender operation. He became a she. So Avalokiteshvara became Kuan Yin, the goddess of compassion. But the Chinese conception of Kuan Yin is very, very beautiful. I recommend to everyone a book by a man named John Blofeld, an Englishman who spent many, many years in China, and the rest of his life in Southeast Asia and other Chinese-related countries after the revolution in China, and he had to leave. But a wonderful man who wrote a number of wonderful books on Buddhism, Taoism, Chinese culture. He wrote a beautiful autobiography as well. But one of his books is The Bodhisattva of Compassion. It's an extraordinary book and a beautiful book about all about Kuan Yin. And so it's a wonderful, wonderful book on the ideal of Kuan Yin, on the spiritual practices related to Kuan Yin. And any Hindu will see an immediate relation to the Hindu ideas as well. Again, that's one of the, as I pointed out many times, one of the geniuses of India, geniuses of the Hindu mind, to see connection, to see similarity. We can all point to differences between everything, but there's a natural tendency in the Hindu mind to see similarity as more important, to see similarity and connection as more important than difference. The difference is variety. which makes for the interesting variety of the universe. But difference does in the Hindu view from the time of the Vedas. The difference doesn't negate connection and similarity and unity. That variety only is a way of expressing different expressions of the underlying unity. And so any Hindu reading about Kuan Yin will immediately see beautiful connections between Kuan Yin and the Hindu goddesses. So you find Mary, you find Kuan Yin, you find in the Native American traditions, and using Native American meaning North and South America, the totality of indigenous peoples, many ideas of the mother goddess. In fact, in Mexico, there was, I forget the name, Cuauhtlue, no, I can't remember it now. I better not try to confuse you by saying something that is wrong. But there is the goddess in Mexico. No, not Guadalupe. Guadalupe is based on this other goddess. But this was an indigenous goddess who was very much like Kali, like the Hindu Kali. So in the native traditions, you have the native goddesses. In fact, scholars believe, as well as indigenous people believe, that the famous Guadalupe that Swapna referred to, Maria de Guadalupe of Mexico, who appeared to this indigenous man back in the 1500s and became known as the savioress of the Americas, Maria de Guadalupe. She was recognized as an appearance of Mary. But indigenous people, as well as scholars, say that actually she was the reappearance of a Mexican goddess. When Don Juan, the indigenous man who had the vision of Guadalupe, when he asked, "Who are you?" and she said her Indian name, then he took that name to the bishop, the local bishop, and said, "The goddess has appeared to me and told me to tell you that her name is such and such," and it's this name I can't remember. Then the bishop, of course not knowing indigenous languages, it sounded to him like Guadalupe, which is a town in Spain. That was the closest he had to it, and so she became Maria de Guadalupe. And a wonderful manifestation, whether one looks on her as Maria or as the Christian Mary, or as the indigenous goddess. A wonderful, powerful image arose, which really she has served as the comfort to the poor and the dispossessed of the Americas since that time. It's connected to Quetzalcoatl, but there's another name, Cuauhtlue or something like that. I don't. Aztec names are very difficult. No, not Cuauhtémoc. All of those are related, but there is another name. There's an image of her in the museum in Mexico City of Native history. Anyway, you find Mary, Kuan Yin, Guadalupe, who is, you could say, now has become a hybrid between the indigenous traditions and Christianity, and of course in Hinduism, a living tradition of the Mother Goddess. Among many people today, among many feminists today, there's the talk about having to revive the Mother Goddess. But what you find usually is that the desire is genuine and is real and is important. But how do you revive a goddess? You take some ancient goddess that has been forgotten for 2,000, 3,000 years, and then you try to imagine what worshiping her would be like, and then you try to make up your own ceremonies and things. No, that has no life. That's an intellectual affair. The urge to do that is good and praiseworthy. But you can't just say, well, we're going to suddenly worship Isis or some other goddess of the past and make up traditions and things when the whole tradition has died. But there are living traditions, including in India. In fact, in India more than anywhere else, living traditions of goddess worship where the goddess is not oftentimes subservient to the male goddess, the male god. Yes, there are stories that Durga is the wife of Shiva, Saraswati is the wife of Brahma, Lakshmi is the wife of Vishnu. So those who worship, nobody worships Brahma, but those who worship Vishnu and Shiva, then the goddess is subservient. But to the worshipper of Lakshmi, to the worshipper of Saraswati, to the worshipper of Durga, they're not subservient to anybody. In the Devi Mahatmyam, which you all know, the Chandi, wonderful text on the Divine Mother, difficult to approach for modern people because it's highly mythological. It's not like the Gita with open philosophy and philosophical statements that anyone can begin to understand. Here it's all clothed in a deep mythological image, but a wonderful text nonetheless. There's explained there and in other texts on the Divine Mother that how Durga was born. Durga was born when the gods themselves couldn't defeat the Asuras. The gods themselves were in trouble, including even Shiva and Vishnu and others. All of the gods, the minor gods, the superior gods, everybody was in trouble. And so how was Durga born? She was born from the power of all of the gods, showing that she was superior to all of the gods. She had the power of all of the gods in totality. So that Durga was the one who was able to defeat Mahishasura and other demons. So in Hinduism you have this idea. Kali. Yes, you can see Kali as the wife of Shiva, and in that sense she's subservient to Shiva. But where do you find Kali? Standing on the chest of Shiva. She's standing on the chest of Shiva. And there are different explanations. Well, I'll come to the interpretation of the image of Kali in a little bit. Let me not get ahead of myself. So you have the living traditions of the worship of God as Mother. In Kuan Yin, in Mary, in a theologically restricted form. In Guadalupe. In Guadalupe, among the indigenous people and the poor people of the Americas who worship Guadalupe, and not just the poor people, rich people worship her also, but among the common people, Guadalupe is not subservient to anyone. She's far superior to Jesus. She's everything. Guadalupe is the real power. She is the mother who can be approached for anything. And so again, I'm not speaking theologically. I'm speaking in the sense of the common people, where Guadalupe. It's wonderful to go to Mexico City and see the Cathedral of Guadalupe. The cathedral itself, the modern cathedral, is ugly. The old basilica was beautiful, but the modern one is ugly. And the reason for its being ugly is that in Mexico for over 100 years, 150 years, there was an anti-clerical, that is, the government was anti-church. And so in order to control the church, for several reasons, but the main reason was that the church had always sided with Spain and with the colonial powers and so forth. So in independent Mexico, the people were very Catholic, but the government was anti-church. And so the church officials were not able to build churches themselves. They had to get government permission and get the government architects to design the churches. Until recently, Catholic priests couldn't even go out into the streets wearing the clerical collar. They had to wear civil clothes. It's only recently, some years back, that was changed, where priests can now walk in their priestly garb. And so that's why the cathedral to Guadalupe is not very attractive, but it's filled with power. And you see the people coming with such devotion from long, long distances. You see people like in India, people who prostrate all the way to get there, and people walking on their knees for miles and miles to get there as an austerity. And so the beautiful devotion of the people to Guadalupe. So you have all of these living traditions of the goddess. So now let me come to the naturalness of the idea of God as mother. And if I were speaking today on the fatherhood of God, then I would just make that everything. But today I'm speaking on the motherhood of God. So I follow the tradition of Swami Vivekananda that whatever idea we take up, then take that up fully, without excuses and without qualifications and without trying to smooth everything out. And so from the standpoint of God as mother, it's a more natural idea than God as father. Because the connection between the child and the mother is more intimate in normal conditions than that between the child and the father. The father becomes very important in the life of a child, both in the life of a girl and of a boy child, later. But the original connection is with the mother. The mother is the one who carries you for 9 months. The mother is the one who nourishes you from her own body. The mother is the one who cleans you, who takes care of you. I'll never forget that at the time of sannyasa, before we take sannyasa, we do our own shraddha ceremony, our own funeral ceremony, because we won't have children who would do the shraddha. So we do our own shraddha before we take sannyasa. And that's why technically in Hindu, for Hindu ritual purposes, we are considered ghosts, bhutas, because we've already performed our own ceremony. So we're already dead. And that's why sannyasi should never be invited to a wedding, because they're inauspicious for a wedding. People think it's for the protection of the sannyasi. No, it's for your protection. Who wants to invite a ghost to a wedding? The wedding should be auspicious, not have ghosts hanging around haunting the place. So I still remember at the time of the Shraddha ceremony, the beautiful mantras, all in Sanskrit, but the beautiful mantras when we make, we offer a pinda to our mother. We offer to our father also. If the parents have already passed away, it's in one way, and if the parents are still alive, as they were in my case, it's in a different way. But the mantras to the mother were so beautiful, describing all of the tremendous care that the mother took, the tremendous suffering that the mother underwent for our sake. There's extraordinarily beautiful mantras about the beauty of motherhood and the unselfish sacrifice of the mother for her child. And so the idea of God as mother is a very natural idea. First of all, from the Hindu standpoint, we've come out of the very being of God. If God created the universe out of nothing, then the universe is still nothing, because out of nothing, nothing comes. It's out of reality that reality comes. And insofar as we have reality, that reality has come from reality. Insofar as we have being, that being has come out of being. Insofar as we have consciousness, that consciousness has come out of consciousness. And that consciousness is the divine. And so the mother and the child, again, have a more intimate relationship because the child comes out of the very body of the mother. And so this universe has come out of the very being of God. We retain that connection to the reality. We're not eternally separate as a creature from the Creator, but we share that living connection with the Divine Mother. And so that's one reason why the idea of God and Mother is the most natural idea. As far as within human relationship, it's the most natural idea that we've come out of the very being of the Divine Mother. Another reason why it's a natural idea is that the mother is not a judge to the child. Yes, sometimes mothers have to correct the child and everything also, that's true. But in general, the mother is the refuge for the child. The mother, that's why, as I've repeated so many times recently, especially in the Gita classes, that on the battlefield, when soldiers are facing death, that is often found that the soldier cries out for their mother. And when they're dying on the battlefield, they're crying for their mother also. Why? Why don't they cry out for their father? Why don't they cry out for their older brother? Why don't they cry out for their sister? Why don't they cry out for their girlfriend, whatever? No, they cry for their mother. Because the mother is refuge. Because the mother is the sharanam, the refuge for the child. The one who can protect the child even from the father. If the father gets too angry, the mother can protect the child even from the father's wrath. And so the mother is not a judge. The mother is one who is all accepting. Yes, the mother corrects the child. The mother may sometimes punish the child. But the child knows that in the end, the mother is my refuge. The mother is where I can go no matter what happens to me, I can go to my mother. And so that's the natural relationship with God. That God is the one that we can go to no matter what happens. No matter what we do in life, no matter what mistakes we commit in life, we can always return to God. When God is seen as Father, that can also be true of the Father, but it's less often true of the Father. It's the mother that is always ready to accept the child back. And that's why in texts in the Abrahamic traditions, they go to great lengths to express the loving nature of the Father. In fact, the very beginning of the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of the most compassionate, the most merciful. Again, calling to those feminine qualities of Allah. And so that, Christ speaks of himself as a mother hen who wants to bring his children under his wings. Again, that motherly image. And so the image of the mother brings a sense of intimacy. The mother is the refuge. The mother is also the first guru. The mother is the first guru. Swami Saradeshanandaji, he was a well-known disciple of Holy Mother, very close to Holy Mother, and a great saint, one of the great saints I had the privilege of knowing and associating with, a very great saint, a man of realization. He asked me and others one day, there were 2 or 3 of us brahmacharyas, when he lived in Beramat while I was in training center for 2 months, he had come to visit. I would go every evening practically and spend time with him. And so once there were 3 or 4 of us gathered around him, we were 3 or 4 Western brahmacharyas, and he asked us, who taught you to say your first prayer? And he said that the first prayer you should learn from the mother. That the mother should be the one who teaches you your first prayer, because the mother is the first guru. Later you may have a mantra guru and other things, but the mother is the first guru. The father is the second guru. And then comes the diksha guru. But from the mother you don't even need diksha, because the mother's relationship is a natural relationship of a teacher. And so the closeness of the relationship, and Sri Ramakrishna used to say that the relationship with the mother is a very pure relationship. A very pure relationship. You find that even a very gross-minded man, a very crude and gross-minded man, if you put a baby in his arms, then suddenly he becomes very soft and gentle. So the relationship of the mother, all the more so, that natural relationship of the mother, the relationship of gentleness, the relationship of refuge, the relationship of love, where love is supremely important. Not God as judge, not God as the punisher, but God as the all-loving refuge. So these are this is the naturalness of the idea and the advantages of the idea. There's a natural connection between the mother goddess, or the motherhood of God, and non-dualism as well. That's not immediately evident. Guru Das Maharaj, Swami Atulananda, he was the first real American saint of the order. There are other American saints that Swami Vivekananda gave initiation to and who became great saints, but Swami Atulananda was the first to join the order as an actual monk of the order. Not that that's what made him a saint, but he was the first member of American member of the order who became a great saint. So he used to say that Swami Turiyananda, with whom he was very close, very intimately related, that Swami Turiyananda was always talking about mother. He said that when Turiyananda spoke about mother, he meant the Atman, meaning that Atman and mother were the same reality to Swami Turiyananda. And that's a natural connection between the sense of non-difference and the worship of mother, because the mother is not different. The mother is not different from the child. The mother and the child, again, the mother gives the very being to the child. And so when that relationship is purely spiritual, that is, the child, once it's born in our experience of people, the child never becomes the mother, of course. They never becomes one with the mother. But in a spiritual sense, it's natural to become one back with the mother. Even in life, among us humans, the child thinks himself one with the mother in an emotional sense. But in a spiritual sense, that oneness is natural and absolute and complete, the relationship between the child and the mother. And so when I'm thinking of God as mother, it's easy to go from that to the embrace of the mother, which turns into oneness, where I go back to oneness with the mother. The mother is the key holder to the non-dual realization. So those who want to remain in relationship with God, which is the majority of people, then they can worship God, but knowing God as mother, knowing that I'm worshiping my own inner self, who is my mother, my most intimate connection, my mother. Those who want to plunge into complete non-dual identity, then they enter into the ocean of the mother. The drop becoming one with the ocean. Not losing itself in the ocean, becoming one with the ocean. And so the mother is the image of the delight of the soul, the all-loving acceptance of the soul, and the mother is also the ocean itself into which we seek to enter, and in which we seek to become one. And so there's a natural connection of non-dualism with the idea of motherhood of God. One of the strange things I noticed, strange in the sense of interesting and not expected, was that a number of Holy Mother's disciples that I knew a number of Holy Mother's disciples, and a number of them were uncompromising non-dualists. They were on the path of knowledge, but with great devotion to the Holy Mother as well. Those who were disciples of the Holy Mother, a number of them were great non-dualists as well. Swami Nityaswarupananda, who translated the Ashtavakra Samhita, one of the most uncompromising books on non-dualism. He was a disciple of Holy Mother. Bharat Maharaj, Swami Abhayananda, who was manager of Bellarmat many years ago, and when I lived at Bellarmat, he would never go into any temple, except only for duty, because he'd lived for many, many years at the Advaita Ashrama in the Himalayas, and so he's a strong Advaitin. He would never go into a temple. But because he was manager of Bellarmat, he had to inspect preparations for the big pujas, like Durga Puja. So he'd go into the temple, he'd walk in there with his walking stick, and he'd stand there and look at the image and say, "Acha, bhalo, bhalo, sab theek, theek." And then turn around and walk out. No namaskar, no praying, no bowing down, anything. He was a disciple of Holy Mother because he was a strict non-dualist. And so that connection between the mother and non-dualism is a living and natural connection. Not that one, as a worshipper of the Divine Mother, has to be a non-dualist. No, many are have a dualistic or a qualified monistic attitude. Purely the dualistic attitude is difficult with the mother, because dualism means that I and mother are separate. But at least I'm the part and mother is the whole. That many people prefer to emphasize that relational attitude, but that doesn't contradict the non-dualistic reality as well. So let me say a few words about the images of the Divine Mother in Hinduism, which you are all familiar with. One beautiful image of the Divine Mother is, of course, Saraswati. Saraswati was originally the Saraswati River, which was the most important river to Vedic civilization. For a long time, scholars thought that the Saraswati was purely mythological. There was no Saraswati River. It was just in the imagination of the Vedic peoples. even though the Vedas are centered around the Saraswati and the Saraswati culture and civilization. But then NASA discovered through satellite imagery the ancient bed of the Saraswati, which is now dried up. Most of it has dried up. It never reaches the ocean. They say that at a point in the Vedic civilization, there was a cataclysm, probably an earthquake, severe earthquake. As you know, the Himalayas are still geologically active, and so there was a cataclysmic earthquake which changed the very course of the Saraswati so that it entered into the desert and just dries up there. And it just remained as a small stream which enters the desert and dries up there. But they have seen the ancient bed of the Saraswati and seen that it was a large river as is described in the Vedas. And so associated with the Saraswati river was the goddess Saraswati, who was the goddess of speech. She was identified even in the Vedas with Vak Devi, the goddess of speech. And so Saraswati, the beautiful image of Saraswati, who is pure Sattva Guna, and who is the goddess of speech, the goddess of the arts, the goddess of music, the goddess of wisdom, the goddess of learning, all of that, the beautiful image of the goddess Saraswati. And then, of course, we have the image of Lakshmi. Lakshmi, who again is thought of as the consort of Vishnu, but originally Lakshmi also is a Vedic goddess. All of these goddesses have Vedic roots. Lakshmi was more independent, but later when there was the tendency to organize Hindu mythology, then gods and goddesses were paired with each other. But Lakshmi, of course, the goddess of prosperity, the goddess of wealth. In fact, even now in India, the two deities who are most popular among the business classes are Lakshmi and Ganesha. And that was one of my first lessons when I first went to India, when I had already been a brahmachari for a year, but I didn't know much about everyday Hinduism until I came to India. And I first came to Mumbai, and so as pointed out, the Ganesha temple, I don't remember which Ganesha temple, but a very popular Ganesha temple in Mumbai. And they told me that there you'll see crowds of men every day going into the temple on their way to the office and praying to Ganesha for success in their business undertakings. But Lakshmi, of course, is much larger than just the goddess who helps businessmen make a lot of money. As you know, Sri Ramakrishna couldn't touch money. He couldn't even touch it. His hand would recoil in pain, because at one point in his spiritual life, he had said, Mata Taka Mati, weighing both the money and earth, dirt, and throwing both into the Ganges and saying that as far as the realization of God goes, both are useless. And so after that, he could never touch money because he had given it up. But the Holy Mother, when people would give Holy Mother money, she would touch it to her forehead as a symbol of Lakshmi. And so in many things you see that Mother is a complement to Sri Ramakrishna. Not a contradiction to Sri Ramakrishna, but a complement to Sri Ramakrishna. Whereas Sri Ramakrishna couldn't touch money, Mother was completely unattached to money, and yet she respected it as a symbol of Lakshmi. So she recognized that it was necessary for the maintenance of a household. It was necessary for taking care of her relatives and all of that. So a wonderful example, Holy Mother is in that, for people who have to live in the world, and for monks who have to take care of ashrams and so forth. That she would keep a box full of cash or whatever cash was on hand. It didn't have to be full, but the box of cash in her home in Jairamati or in Calcutta. But she would leave it to people to take cash and to put cash in it. She had no attachment to it. But again, she saluted money as a symbol of Lakshmi. And so the image of Lakshmi also, for a long time I had no appreciation for Lakshmi. Being a monk and everything, I thought, no, Durga, Kali, Shiva, renunciates and all of that. But the image of Lakshmi is a beautiful image. And she's the goddess of beauty as well. The goddess of beauty, the goddess of prosperity, And Swami Prabhavananda used to say that Lakshmi also is important for a ashram, because the ashram also needs funds just to survive. In order to do its work, it needs funds. And so he would say that Lakshmi is important there also. That yes, for a monk, in their personal life, to be completely non-attached, but in the life of the ashram, it's important. And so Lakshmi is the goddess of beauty, the goddess of everything positive, the goddess of prosperity. Swami Vivekananda himself wanted India once again to be prosperous, because if you choose poverty for spiritual reasons, then that's fine, that's good. But poverty should not be chosen by a culture and by circumstance for everybody where it's imposed consciously or unconsciously. And so he wanted India to come back to a position of prosperity as India had been prosperous. Up until the 1600s, 1500s or 1600s, India was the most prosperous country in the world. That's why everyone wanted to come to India. So he wanted that prosperity. He wanted Lakshmi to come back to India. And then you come to Durga and to Kali, and I'll close with a few words about them. Durga, again, as I said, Durga is the totality of the power of all of the gods. All of the deities are assumed in the person of Durga. Swami Swahananda used to tell Western audiences, because Western audiences they had the idea of the mother of the goddess as like Mary or Kuan Yin or the Holy Mother, who was all loving and very gentle. And here is Durga with 10 arms and all of them holding weapons. So Swami Swahananda would say, well, what do you want? Do you want a namby-pamby mama, or do you want a strong mother? Durga is the embodiment of power. That's a strange thing when you think about it, except to the child, who is the mother? The mother is all powerful to the child. The mother can accomplish anything to the child. The child has no idea that the mother has limitations, that there are limitations to the mother's power. The mother is all powerful. In Buddhism, in the tantric side of Buddhism, they reversed roles. They made the feminine passive and the masculine strong and powerful. But in Hinduism, they saw that no, mother is the real power. Mother is the real power. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, that the judge goes to court and says, you are condemned to life in prison. You will be hanged. This person, throw him in the dungeon, and so forth. And then he goes home and he's meek and mild in front of his wife. So the mother was seen as the Shakti aspect of the divine. Again, in Buddhism, it was just the opposite. But in Hinduism, it was seen as the male god was the transcendent, that is, absent, transcendent. But the goddess is all powerful and all accomplishing. So why does Durga have 10 arms? Because she's active in the 10 directions. She accomplishes everything in all the 10 directions. The 8 points of the compass here, including the intermediate points, and then the zenith and the nadir. So she's active in all 10 directions and all accomplishing. So the hymns to the Mother Goddess are beautiful. I marked a point in the famous hymn which starts in chapter 1, Tvam Swaha, Tvam Swadha, Tvam Hi Vashatkara Swaratmika, etc. A beautiful hymn. Here, I'll just read the English for time's sake. You are the primordial cause of everything, addressing Durga. You are the primordial cause of everything, bringing into force the 3 gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, the 3 qualities of creation. You are the dark night of periodic dissolution, that is pralaya, kala ratri is called here. You are the dark night of periodic dissolution. You are the great night of final dissolution, and the terrible night of delusion. So the wonderful idea of the mother as everything. Mother is the terrible night of delusion as well, from which we suffer. You are the goddess of good fortune, the ruler, modesty, intelligence, characterized by knowledge, bashfulness, nourishment, contentment, tranquility, and forbearance. Armed with sword, spear, club, discus, conch, bow, arrows, slings, and iron mace, you are terrible. Ghora, you are terrible. And you are pleasing, yea, more pleasing than all the pleasing things, and exceedingly beautiful. Ati Sundari, exceedingly beautiful. You are indeed the supreme Ishwari, God, the personal God, supreme Ishwari, beyond even the gods, the male gods. You are the supreme Ishwari, beyond the high and the low. And so whatever or wherever a thing exists, conscient or inconscient, that is conscious or non-conscious, real or unreal, whatever power all that possesses is yourself. So you are the power of all. You are the consciousness of everything. You are the reality of everything. You are the high and you are the low. And so this wonderful idea of Durga as the all-conquering Durga, the all-conquering Durga. She who is Durga, difficult to conquer. And Durga, of course, in the male is used as a name for a fort as well. So she's the great fortress. And she is Sutarasi Tarase Namaha in the Vedic verse, which I said at the beginning in the Mangalacharanam, that you make it very easy to cross over the ocean of samsara. You who are Durga, difficult to access, the great fortress, and yet you make it easy to cross over the ocean of samsara. And finally, let me say a word about Kali, because Kali Puja will come up next in early November. November 6th is Kali Puja. So Kali is an image which, of course, at first is a cause of great consternation, horror to many people, and even in India. Sometimes that happens, where Kali is seen as tamasic, as the destructive goddess and very negative in everything. In fact, even was it Haladhari, I think it was, Ramakrishna's relative who spent time in the early days in Dakshineshwar. He said that Kali is all the tamas, the deity of all tamas. And Sri Ramakrishna said, no, she's beyond the three gunas and yet the retainer of the three gunas. So Kali is an image which is difficult to understand, but beautiful when we understand it. Kali is everything. Kali is life itself. Kali is the image of life itself. Kali is the image of reality itself. That on one hand she's holding the severed head, and the other hand she's holding the sword which severed the head on her left side. So she's the giver of death, a giver of destruction. And yet on the other side she's giving the Abhaya Mudra, fearlessness, and the Varadana Mudra, the giver of boons. And so on one hand she's giving death, and the other side she's giving fearlessness and the giver of life. So it means that she's both life and death, which means that if we see everything as coming from Mother, then everything is a gift of love. Death itself holds no fear from us if we see that it's coming from the all-loving Mother. Some people have said, oh yes, Kali is the chastising mother. No, she's not the chastising mother at all. She's not the punishing mother at all. She's all love itself, the all-loving Mother. And if we see in all of the things that come to us, superficially good and bad, if we see all of it is coming from the Mother, then we have no fear of anything. We have no fear of anything because everything comes from the loving heart of the Mother. So it's not that Mother is punishing on one side and saying good things with the other side. No. The apparent bad experiences of life are also blessings if we see them as coming from the Mother. Our problem is that we want only the things that we think are good, and we want to avoid the things that we think of as bad. But if we can see as everything is coming from the same all-loving Divine Mother, then we see that everything is good with a capital G, not good with a little g, but everything is coming from the Divine Mother. And so Swami Vivekananda, he, in his own life, he worshipped Kali. And he, of course, his disciple, Sister Nivedita, his Irish-English disciple, Sister Nivedita, became a great exponent of the worship of Kali. And I think that Swamiji himself, he said that the worship of Kali helps me in my work, because Swamiji's natural tendency was to be transcendent, to have his mind in a very high state and to remain there. But because he had to work, he was a slave of the Divine Mother, a slave of Kali, he had to work. And so the worship of Kali helped him in his work because, as you see in Swamiji's life, he was constantly being buffeted by the waves of action and reaction in the world. Tremendous difficulties Swamiji had to face. And so in worshipping Kali, he was able to overcome all difficulties because he saw everything as coming from Mother. Beautiful things he said about Mother Kali. But it's important to remember that Ma Kali is an extremely deep symbol, but to a person who worships Kali, she's not a symbol, she's reality itself. As a symbol, she is black. Black is the night, which is the absence of all color. Black is the absence of all color, so that reveals her transcendent nature. White is the unity of all colors. Black is the absence of all color. And so she is beyond the three gunas. She's naked. She wears no clothing because she's the naked truth. She's what life really is, not what we want life to be, but what life really is. Life and death both are part of life. We want the life part, we want to forget the death part. But she's naked reality as it is. She has a mala of severed heads around her neck. Those are the 52 letters of the Sanskrit alphabet. And so she is the source of speech, but that which is beyond speech as well, because she transcends speech itself. She has a girdle of human arms, severed arms, because she is the real doer. We think that we're the doer, that I'm going to do, but no, she is the doer. And so the image of Kali is a profound, profound image. But to the worshipper of Kali, she's simply Mother. She's simply Mother, and the all-loving Mother. So let me close by reading Swami Vivekananda's. I brought several of Swamiji's poems on the Divine Mother, but let me at least get to this last one. I'll just read this in place of a closing chant. This is his poem, English poem, Kali the Mother. It's one of his best English poems. In fact, I think the two best poems Swamiji wrote in English. He wrote a number of poems in English, and of those, the very best, just from the standpoint of poetry, but also from the standpoint of meaning and so forth, the Kali the Mother, and My Play is Done, which is addressed to the Divine Mother. But this was written in a state of ecstasy. When Swamiji had finished writing this, he wrote it in Kashmir, when he was filled with the idea of Mother after visiting Kir Bhavani. After writing this poem, he passed out on the floor in a state of exhaustion from the ecstasy in which he wrote the poem. The stars are blotted out. The clouds are covering clouds. It is darkness, vibrant, sonant. In the roaring, whirling wind are the souls of 1,000,000 lunatics, just loosed from the prison house, wrenching trees by the roots, sweeping all from the path. So you get the picture that he's creating of Ma Kali. The souls of 1,000,000 lunatics, just loosed from the prison house, wrenching trees by the roots, sweeping all from the path. The sea has joined the fray and swirls up mountain waves to reach the pitchy sky. The flash of lurid light reveals on every side 1,000,000 shades of death, begrimed and black, scattering plagues and sorrows, dancing mad with joy. Come, Mother, for terror is thy name, death is in thy breath, and every shaking step destroys a world for e'er. Thou time, the all-destroyer, come, O Mother, come, who dares misery love, dance and destruction's dance, and hug the form of death. To him the mother comes. So that's the Swamiji's poem to Kali the mother. It's a strong medicine, hugging the form of death. But he says that if we can bring ourselves to that, then we are liberated. If we can bring ourselves to that point. He doesn't say that it's easy. But why did he emphasize this? He didn't always, in his public teaching, he didn't emphasize Kali. But he did emphasize the worship of the terrible. Why? Because he foresaw that great difficult times were coming to humankind. He foresaw that great difficulties would be coming, and that we have to be strong. And nothing makes us so strong as the ability to worship the terrible, to face the terrible, and to recognize in it the loving face of the mother. Once Sister Nivedita there was a visitor who had come to Sister Nivedita long after Swamiji had passed away. And outside, this was in Calcutta, outside was an electrical storm. And just right near her house, there was a huge strike of lightning with the immediate thunder because of its closeness. And Nivedita went to the mother, went to the window and said, Ma Kali, Ma Kali, Ma Kali. That spontaneous reaction of hers because she was a worshipper of Kali. So again, I said I would close with this, so I'll close with the last words again. Who dares misery love, dance in destruction's dance, and hug the form of death, to him the mother comes. Now let me give, I've already gone over time, so I won't take questions today. I'm sorry for that, because I know I've talked like it engenders questions. So.